All right, so this is the video. Let's just watch it, and then I'm gonna go into the study.
About we haven't heard much from players around the league this week about Kyrie Irving's social media posts and subsequent comments. I'm just curious, why do you think that is, considering this league is so socially conscious?
I'm not sure. If you want to ask me a question, you can ask me. I can't speak for 449 players.
Sure. Certainly your position, you've been in the position of the best to speak for the
I can tell you this. It's simple. Me personally, I don't condone any hate to any kind, to any race, to Jewish communities, to Black communities, to Asian communities. You guys know where I stand, and it's part of the reason why I didn't air the shop episode, why we kicked that, out of the archives, because it was hate conversation going on there, and I don't represent that. There's no place in this world for it. Nobody can benefit from that, and I believe what Kyrie did caused some harm to a lot of people, and he has since over the last, I think today or was it yesterday, he apologized, but he caused some harm, and I think it's unfortunate, but I don't stand on the position to harm people when it comes to your voice or your platform or anything. And so it doesn't matter what color your skin is, how tall you are, what position you are in. If you are promoting or soliciting or saying harmful things to any community that harm people, then I don't respect it. I don't condone it.
Considering you do identify that his actions as being harmful to people, what do you believe could be a resolution for him to get past the current suspensions that he has with the Nets and Nike?
I don't know. Because at the end of the day, Kyrie is his own man. He stands up in front of the media and speaks. He is a man. He has a great family. I mean, I love the kid. Well, he's not even a kid anymore. He's in his 30s. He just said that the other day in his press. I was like, it's insane. I don't know the direction, the steps that he take, but he's apologized for what he said. And I hope that he understands that what he said was harmful to a lot of people. And we as humans, none of us are perfect, but I hope he understands how, what he did or the actions that he took was just harmful to a lot of people. I really didn't get into it too much, but I understand that when you hurting anybody, I understand that. That is just common sense.
All right. All right, so that's the video of LeBron James. He said a lot, but he didn't really say much of anything. But he said basically, for those who don't know, KyrieIrving posted a link to Amazon to a documentary called Hebrews to Negros, Wake Up Black America. It was a film by a guy named Ronald Dalton, and it's on Amazon. It's a public link. It's a video. It's a documentary about that. But KyrieIrving got a lot of backlash. He's actually been suspended for 5 games for that. They said that there was a lot of quote unquote anti-Semitic content on that documentary, even though Amazon still has it up and Amazon hasn't been punished, but KyrieIrving is being punished for that. But I just wanted to show this link about LeBron James because we're going to basically show his ties to being compromised to why he's saying what he's saying. And, just the hypocritical message that he just put out, because as we know, just a few years ago, he would say things about President Trump and, we called him an idiot. He said things like that. But, I guess it doesn't really matter if, he has children. He has people that offend him.
We haven't heard much.
Let's keep going. This is LeBron James in 2011, back when he was in Miami, 2011, 2012. And he said he's praying with a Kabbalistic Caucasian Jewish priest or rabbi, I'm sorry. And he was, this is a rabbi that he takes on his business meetings everywhere he goes in regards to his financial decisions. And he's a Kabbalist, by the way. And by the way, there's a reason why LeBron was wearing number 42 in that press conference on his hat. That's Kabbalistic as well. But this is the priest and or the rabbi and LeBron. And now in 2022, this is about a month ago, LeBron James blessed by Kabbalah Rabbi at New York wedding. And there's just a little bit about that article. Los Angeles Lakers star LeBron James has received the blessing of a famous Kabbalist rabbi at a Jewish wedding in New York. James received a blessing from Yoshiyahu Yosef Pinto, a prominent Israeli Moroccan rabbi who founded the organization Mazdat Shuva Israel and was appointed chief rabbi of Morocco in 2019. LeBron has long been linked to Pinto, with him reportedly paying six figures to Hebrew-speaking rabbi back in 2010 for spiritual guidance, according to celebrity news site TMZ. And Rabbi Pinto has been a subject of controversy in Israel after he was convicted of trying to bribe an Israeli police officer in 2014. He served just over a year in Israeli prison after immigrating to Morocco in 2017. So this is who LeBron is linked to. That's why, anything LeBron has to say about this topic is, it's just compromise. He has dealings with people who are invested in his career. So, you know, it's expected that he would put out a statement of just saying that he condemns the message, even though he has no idea what the movie was about, and he doesn't even want to address it. He just has to put a statement just because of his own financial, business ties, which is his business, which is, his personal business, fine. But it's just the hypocrisy that just surprises me. But again, this is the video, just kind of zoomed in. This is number 42 on his hat. Now, a lot of people know 42 is Jackie Robinson's number. A lot of sport athletes, they wear this number. Especially, the Dodgers are in LA now. Brooklyn Dodgers, they moved to LA. Jackie Robinson played for the Dodgers, and LeBron's in LA. So you would put that together like, oh, okay, he's just paying homage to the LA Dodgers. No, that's not the case. He put on his hat, or he was told to put on his hat, because the number 42 represents something in the Kabbalah, or in the Kabbalah uses numerology, or they use numbers to communicate things that words, instead of using words, they use numbers, right? So gematria is the substitution of numbers for letters of the Hebrew alphabet, is a favorite method of exegesis used by medieval Kabbalists to derive mystical insights into sacred writings or obtain new interpretations of the text. So I'm not an expert in gematria. I don't claim to be, but I do know what the number 42 means in gematria, just because I've seen it several times. So if you type in the word nigger, the number 42 pops up in reduction. And just a quick background about gematria is that basically ordinal is regular. It's just every letter equals a number. So ABC equals 1, 2, 3. That's normal. And reduction, every letter is single digits. So there's no double digits. It's just 1 through 9. So if you count that word nigger through 1 through 9, it gets 42. And that's a reason why Jackie Robinson wore the number 42. He was given the number 42. He didn't wear, if you look up the history of Jackie Robinson, he didn't wear 42 when he was in college, whether he played football or baseball. He didn't wear number 42 in the Negro Leagues. He was given the number 42 when he got to the Brooklyn Dodgers, because that's the way that they mock the so-called black person, black male particularly, by making them wear number 42. That's why when you see images, you'll see 42 and a lot of kind of things that they wear, whether it's in a sporting like movie or things like that, you'll see the number 42 a lot. But that's the reason why LeBron wore 42. So let's get into anti-Semitism. I just wanted to highlight that, because anti-Semitism is being used, it's being weaponized really, and it's not really shown what it actually means. So this is the dictionary, just on a regular dictionary. Google it right there. It says hostile to or prejudiced against Jewish people. That is the common definition. And we've talked about this in the past. Definitions have changed over the years. The same words that we use today were not used the same way 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. So anti-Semitism is not what it used to, what it is now. It's not what it used to be. So we're going to break down that word. Let's go into the etymology of that word. All right. So this is the website. I think this is the one of the Anti-Defamation League websites. I think this is just a common anti-Semitism website, but it says, what is anti-Semitism? It's a non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism. So what is a working definition? A working definition is a definition that is chosen for an occasion and may not fully conform with established or authoritative definitions. A definition being developed, a tentative definition that can be tailored to create an authoritative definition. That is exactly what anti-Semitism is being used. It is not a concrete definition. It changes every day. It really can change into whatever they want it to be. That's why they can just use it as anything that's offensive to quote unquote Jewish people. But that's not what it actually means. But that's why they give it the label a working definition. You see how words are able to be manipulated to control people? All right, so this is just a list of what they call anti-Semitism. We don't have to go through it all. This video is recorded, so you can pause it and just watch it. But in general, it says calling for aiding or justifying the killing, harming of Jews, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegation about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as a collective, or like I said, the myth of the world Jewish conspiracy of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions, which is so interesting that they put that as anti-Semitism. But when you look at who are the presidents or the CEOs of these corporations like Disney, which owns ESPN, or Fox, CNN, MSNBC, so many, they all have, or even Facebook, Meta, Instagram, the tech companies, they're all ran by a Jewish person. So it's just like, why are they embarrassed to admit that? It's almost like they understand that there's something else going on in the background just to admit that, hey, we dominate these areas. That's actually something to be proud of. If I have family members or I have people that I knew that were in these, who were in leadership positions like that, I would be proud to admit that, unless there was some insidious reason why I don't want to admit that, whether it be for nepotism, favoritism that I got this position, or if this is just for the benefit of my people and not for anyone else. Maybe that's the reason why I would feel embarrassed. But they call that as anti-Semitism if you bring that up. All right. So it's other things here, but we don't got to go into that. Oh, I also found this when I was on the website, the Anti-Defamation League website. This is a picture of Michael Eric Dyson and David Schwimmer, who is the actor on on Friends, played Ross. It says, be in the room for this inspiring conversation about speaking out to fight anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism, the current relationship between our communities. And when I saw this, I was just like, there's a reason why they always put a kind of charismatic so-called Black figure as a kind of a partner in league with the Jewish community, Caucasian Jewish community. And they do this because it's really a way to siphon the energy from Black people in order to kind of put them in their cause in the forefront, because they use really a lot of our spiritual energy as a way to prompt themselves up, but they still acted under the guise that we're helping you. We're helping the Black community. At the same time, they're not really focusing on Black issues. They're focusing on societal issues that seem to be a Trojan horse to kind of get so-called Black people to be in league with them. But in the end, it doesn't really benefit us as a people. It benefits everyone else around us, especially now. So I put a Facebook, actually Instagram post. I said, this is why, they call it the Black Boule. When it was started back in the early 1900s, was W.E.B. Du Bois. When they say the Boule, that means the advisors or protectors to the king. And the king is who you can't talk about. That's just the Caucasian Jew, because anytime you talk about the Caucasian Jew, you get labeled as anti-Semitic. That's why, the NAACP, since its inception, has always had a Caucasian Jew executive leader, whether it be Henry Moskowitz, William English Walling, whose wife was Jewish, or even the most recent, Kyrie Kaplan. I think he passed away a few years ago. Their job is to always make sure that, so-called Black people always find this goal of equality, chase after that like a carrot, but they never really seek independence or self-identity for the so-called Black people. I understand, NAACP has helped, to a degree, to help people of color, but it's not to advance the color or advance people of color like the acronym states. So they accept that you just are supposed to be part of this global society that they want to embrace everybody to fall in with them as the head. That's what equality is. It looks like everybody comes under the umbrella and follow under the teachings of the Caucasian Jewish person. Because the NAACP was started as almost as a counteract to Marcus Garvey's movement of self-identity and to be separate, to have our own country, have our own government. But when W.E.B. Du Bois and other prominent so-called Black people at that time, Ida B. Wells and such, they really formed a league against him, and they ended up getting him trumped up in charges, and they ended up deporting him back to Jamaica. And he has documents where he talks about how basically he was stopped from actually trying to help his own people. So, but that's what the NAACP is all about. That's why it's like they always are ran in league to act like they're for the advancement of our people, but they're really just there to keep us chasing our tail, not to really be self-identified. So let's go into anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, 1881, from German anti-Semitismus, first used by William Marr. He was born in 1819. He was a German radical nationalist race agitator who founded the Anti-Semitism Liga, or Anti-Semitism League, in Germany. And he actually put out a lot of documents and propaganda about how the Jewish people were actually taking over Germany and that they needed to combat that. And a lot of his information was actually used by the Nazi Party to form their agenda against the Jewish people. So he was the first one to actually coin that or use that term. He was actually very proud to be called an anti-Semite. And he was inspired by this French writer, aristocrat named Joseph Arthur Negobono. And he wrote this book called An Essay on the Equality of the Human Races. And it was a very basically racist book, talking about how the Caucasian or the Aryan race, quote unquote Aryan race, was superior to all other races. And the ironic thing is that Arthur Debaganu, he actually wrote this book for King George V, I believe, either the fourth or the fifth, who was King of England, of Hanover. And the irony of that is that actually King George had Black lineage. He was a so-called Black man, a very light-skinned so-called Black man, but that's very ironic how he actually dedicated that book for him. But this is just an anti-Semite. But let's go into the word Semite. What does that mean? Because it gets thrown around a lot. So let's see. Semites, 1847, a Jew, Arab, Assyrian, or Aramean, an apparently isolated use from 1797, refers to Semitic language group, back formation from Semitic, or else from French Semite, from modern Latin Semita, from late Latin Sem, Greek Sem, Shem. So the Greek is what changed the word Shem to Sem, because in the Bible we know it as Shem, who was one of three sons of Noah in Genesis 10. Regarded as the ancestor of the Semites in Bible-based anthropology, from Hebrew Shem. In this modern sense, it is said to have been introduced by German historian August Schlosser in 1781. All right, so now we get the definition of what a Semite is. It comes from a lineage of Shem. Now, this is my compact Bible dictionary. This is my Zondervan dictionary. This is a real book I got in my library. I'm actually going to go to a couple pages. All right. Let y'all know, full discretion. All right. This is a picture of Japheth. All right. So this is the definition. We're going to that, just the Bible definition of Japheth. God will enlarge, son of Noah, Genesis 5:32, 6:10, 7:13, 10:21, has 7 sons. Descendants occupy the isles of Gentiles in Genesis 10:5, blessed by Noah. All right, that's Japheth, right? Let's go to Shem. Shem, all the way at the bottom, it says, second son of Noah and progenitor of the Semitic race, was born 98 years before the flood, Genesis 11:10, and lived 600 years, outliving his descendants. And it says he outlived all his descendants except for Eber and Abraham, basically. All right, and now let's go to Ham. Ham, perhaps Hot, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negros, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Genesis 10, 6-20. His indecency with his father lay drunken, brought a curse upon Canaan. All right, so that is the biblical definition in this book. I didn't make anything up. I didn't alter anything. Y'all saw it yourself. That's my fingernail at the bottom of the page. So that's what it says. Ham is the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. So why does it say not the Negroes? Right? If Ham is the progenitor of all the dark-skinned people of the earth, why does it say not the Negro? All right. Just want you to think about that, because we're going to get to that at the end. But I'm going to go through, kind of some history about that. So this is Genesis 10. We're going to first talk about Shem a little bit. So this is just Shem in the Bible, where it says the children of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. This is Genesis 10, verse 22, verse 23. The children of Aram, Uz, Or, Gather, and Mash, and Arphax begat Salah, and Selah begat Eber, and Eber was born 2 sons, and the name of one was Peleg, for in his days for the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And it's just a full genealogy of Shem. So you see it goes all the way from Elam, who is the progenitor of what we would call a Southeast Asian, like Indian, Pakistan, kind of like that area. But all goes all the way down. You see Abraham and his son Isaac, and his sons Esau and Jacob. It goes from Lot, Moab, and the Ammonites, all that. So all these people is what you would call a Semite or a Shemite. These are all the people who are descendant of Shem. All right. So that's not just the quote unquote Jewish people or in general, because if you call yourself Jewish or a Jew, that means you're from Judah or you're from the kingdom of Judah. But you see, the Israelites, there was 12 tribes. It's not just one tribe, right? So there are multiple people that are labeled as Shemites or Semites, basically. That's why that definition that we saw before, where it says a Jew, Arab, Assyrian, Aramean, there's multiple people that can be labeled as a Semite, right? All right. There's just the full list of the sons of Noah and their descendants. And this is a map. If people like to look at the maps, you see in the green, those are the descendants of Ham. You see the Heth, Sinites, and Arvadites and all that. Those are the Canaanites. You see the black, those are the descendants of Japheth. The red are descendants of Shem, right? So you see how they're kind of spread apart. And I want to talk about this too, because you might see this Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz, you might kind of conflate that with the Ashkenazi Jew. Now we read Ashkenaz is from Japheth, right? So you're like, oh, okay. So the Ashkenazi Jew may come from Japhite rather than Semite, right? You hear that a lot. I'm just trying to clarify that. So let's read about Ashkenaz and let's get some understanding. So Ashkenazi Jews, I'm sorry for the small print too, by the way. Sometime in the post-biblical early medieval period, the Jews of Central and Eastern Europe came to be called the name Ashkenazim, in conformity with the custom of designating areas of Jewish settlement with biblical names, Spain being identified as Sepharad from Obadiah chapter 1, verse 20, French as Sepharet, 1 Kings 17:9, and Bohemia as land of Canaan by the high medieval period Talmudic commentators like Rashi began to use Ashkenaz or Aretz Ashkenaz to designate Germany, earlier known as Loiter, where especially in Rhineland communities of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz, the most important Jewish communities arose. So they're saying around this time in the medieval period, they had the Talmud, which is the collection of oral history and a lot of teachings from the rabbis, especially the Pharisaic rabbis. They wrote down their oral traditions in a book called the Talmud, and they really used that as on par with the Torah or the Old Testament, the Bible. So sometime around that period, they started to call Germany Ashkenaz. Right. All right. I'll just y'all can read the rest, and we're just gonna keep going. So let's read a little bit about Ashkenaz. So this is Genesis 10, verse 2. The son of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tubal, and Meshkez, and Tiraz. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphtah, and Togarmah. So let's go into Ashkenaz. Let's read about this. This is in the lexicon. Ashkenaz, name of the region of a nation in northern Asia, sprung from Sumerians. Genesis 10:3, to be sought for near Armenia. Jeremiah 51:27. Unless this were a province of that country, the modern Jews understand it to be Germany and call that country by this Hebrew name, which is only to be attributed to their wonderful ignorance of geography. So basically, the lexicon editors are saying that the Jewish people, they just ignore real history and real geography and make up their own things. Basically, that's what he just said, because he said Germany has no connection to Ashkenaz. He said this is in Northern Asia. It's not even close. So that's what I say. So Ashkenaz, that's not the same thing. They conflate that, but that's just misinformation out there. When you hear people saying like, "Oh, you're from Japheth, you're not that," that's not true. That's not true. All right, let's read about this. The Khazars, because this is also something that you may hear about. Khazar. Bear with me. We're going to read a little bit about this. This is in the Britannica Encyclopedia on the internet. Khazar, a member of the Confederation of Turkic-speaking tribes that in the late 6th century CE established a major commercial empire covering the southeastern section of modern European Russia. Although the origin of the term Khazar and the early history of the Khazar people are obscure, it is fairly certain that the Khazars were originally located in the northern Caucasus region and were part of the Western Turkic Empire in Turkestan. So they're saying they're from the Caucasus region. So they're Caucasian. When I say Caucasian, I mean they're from the Caucasus Mountains area around that region. All right. So the Khazars were in contact with the Persians in the mid-6th century CE, and they aided in the Byzantine Empire. Heraclius reigned 610 to 641, his campaign against the Persians. So the empire throughout this 9th century, but by the 10th century, the empire faced with the growing might of the Pechenegs to their north and west, and the Russians around Kiev suffered a decline. So when Sviatoslav, the ruler of Kiev, launched the campaign against the Khazars in 1965, Khazar power was crushed. Although the Khazars continue to be mentioned in historical documents as late as the 12th century, by 1030, their political role in the lands north of the Black Sea had greatly diminished. Despite the relatively high level of Khazar civilization and the wealth of data about the Khazar that is preserved in Byzantine and Arab sources, not a single line of the Khazar language has survived. So this great nation was around for almost 400 years, 500 years, and after they got crushed by the Russians, they just disappeared. Like, where did they go? They just, we have sources that they existed from the Byzantine and Arab sources, but for some reason their language just disappeared. That's interesting. Where did they go? This is a book called The Invention of the Jewish People. I'll put this book up here because there's other books I could have used, but this man right here, Shlomo San. He's actually a Jewish professor in Israel, in Tel Aviv, Israel. He's a professor. He wrote this book in 2008, and it was a very controversial book, but I think it's good to quote him because he's actually Jewish. So I'm actually getting the source from the horse's mouth. So I like using sources like that, because if I use another source, they'll label that anti-Semitic. So hopefully they don't label this anti-Semitic if it came from their own people. So this is I forget what page it's on, but just read it towards the bottom. He quotes this about the Khazars. Um, let me say this. Actually, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. Let's just go at the top, though. It says, Yehuda Halevi noted in the Khazari that the Khazars converted in 1740 CE, but the date may not be correct. A Christian document written circa 86-4 CE in distant Western France stated that all the Khazari obeyed the precepts of Judaism. And at some stage between the mid-8th and mid-9th centuries, the Khazars adopted Jewish monotheism as their particular faith and right. All right, and let's skip down to the green highlight. If in the 19th century scholars were doubtful about the conversion of the Khazar kingdom today, it is not in dispute. The spreading monotheism reached the Caucasus and the steppes of the Volga and the Don, today's southern Russia, and convinced rulers and tribal elites to believe in the many advantages of a single deity. The question remains, why did Khazaria opt for Judaism rather than the other monotheistic religions? With this, there are less onerous requirements. If we set aside the magical sermon, including King Joseph's letter, the Cambridge document, and Yehuda Halevi's book, we are left with the same explanation. The account of the Himyar conversion, the desire to remain independent in the face of mighty, grasping empires, in this case, the Orthodox Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Muslim Caliphate, impelled the rulers of Khazaria to adopt Judaism as a defensive ideological weapon. So he's saying that the reason that they adopted Judaism was because it was the best option for their country after they were being destroyed or being attacked on all sides. They needed something to unify the people with. And just like today, religion is used, basically to control the people, to control the masses. You can use the Bible, particularly the Bible, or any form of religion, whether it be the Quran, any book of faith, you can use it to make the people do what you want them to do, whether it be to attack people or to defend your own people. It unifies people. So that's what he's saying. That's why the people used it. And they said, had the Khazars adopted Islam, for example, they would have been subjects to the Caliph. So if they would have went to Islam as their main religion, they would have had to obey the Caliphate or or at that time, I guess the Ottoman Turks, who were, I guess the Ottoman Turks not yet, but it was the Arabian tribes who were taking over the Middle East at that time. So they had to obey their caliphs, their leaders, if they went to Islam. And then had they remained pagan, they would have been marked for annihilation by the Muslims, who did not tolerate idolatry. And Christianity, of course, would have subordinated them to the Eastern Empire for a long time. So the slow and gradual transition from the ancient shamanism of religion of Jewish monotheism probably also contributed to the consolidation and centralization of the Khazar realm. All right. So also, if they want to convert it to Christianity, they would have been subject to the Pope. So Judaism was allowed them to basically have a sense of autonomy. All right. So we ain't got to read the rest, but I just wanted to highlight that. There's another part of this book towards the end. It said, when the great historian Mark Bloch had to come up with the definition of the Jews, he described them as a group of co-religious or religionists originally brought together from every corner of the Mediterranean, Turco-Khazar, and Slav worlds. When Mark Bloch, he was a very famous historian, French historian. He actually lived contemporary during World War II, and actually he was a Jewish historian too in France, and a secular Jew. But he was when France was taken over by the Nazi Empire in Germany, he was allowed to still be a professor, but he was under like strict, heavy regulation and oppression and stuff like that. But he's a French Jewish historian, very famous, and they say one of the most famous historians. And he says that the Jews are a collection of these people: Mediterranean, Turco, Khazar, and Slavs. So the most important work demonstrating that the origin of the majority of Eastern European Jews lies in the Turkic and Slav tribes of the Khazar kingdom is that of Abraham Polak, professor and founder of the Department of Middle Eastern History at the University of Tel Aviv. As far as the Khazar problem is concerned, the difference between Zionists and non-Zionists is that the latter put forth the very unlikely thesis that the mass of Jews in the Khazar kingdom came from Eretz Israel and sought to preserve in their new land the principle of Abrahamic descent. So he's saying that the Zionists believe that the Jewish people today are the descendants of the people of ancient Israel. And he said that's very unlikely that happened. And throughout the book he gives his reasons because of the population. He said that it's impossible that they were that large that came out of Egypt or came out of Israel, ancient Israel. And he says also just their genetic structure is so different. And he said they're closer to Germans than they are to Arabs. So he's like, it makes more sense that this is the case. And this is what his whole book is about. That's why it's so controversial, because Zionists, they really didn't like that. Because if people don't realize that Jewish people are not uniform in their thought process. There are many Jews who obey the Torah strictly, and there are many Jews who obey the Talmud. There are many Jews who are secular, almost atheists, and there are Zionist Jews who believe that they have rights to the homeland of Israel, and there are non-Zionist Jews who they just want to live in their home country, whether it be America or England or France, Russia, so they don't really have those ties. So there's not this uniformity of Jewish people. They debate amongst themselves. But in regards to, they don't really let you know that. Like, unlike a lot of our people, we debate, every day we get a chance. But, they kind of keep that under wraps. So, but I want to transition now to Herod, because that was the Khazar theory or allegations that I'm putting. Everything I'm saying is alleged. I'm putting this on YouTube, so everything I'm saying is alleged, even though it's empirical evidence right here. But everything I'm saying is alleged. But we're gonna go to the Herod the Great, and I want to read about this because this is also history that they don't really teach, and it's about Herod and his descendants as being quote unquote Jewish. So this is just his genealogy or his descendants, and we're gonna get into his father as well. So this is Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. It says, when Jesus, or Yahushua, was born in Bethlehem in Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born, King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. And Herod the king had heard these things. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So now let's get into the history of Herod, because he has a very interesting background. And how did he become the king of the Jews at that time? So Herod means heroic, the name of a royal family that flourished among the Jews in the time of Christ and the apostles. Herod the Great was the son of Antipater of Idumea. And for those who don't know, Idumea is Edom in Greek. All right. So Antipater, Herod's father, was a Edomite. All right. We'll get to that later. Appointed king of Judea, BC 40, by the Roman Senate at the suggestion of Antony with the consent of Octavian, who at the length, and he was the emperor, he at the length overcame the great opposition which the country made to him and took possession of the kingdom BC 37, and took possession of the kingdom BC 37. And after the battle of Actium, he was confirmed by Octavian, whose favor he ever enjoyed. He was brave and skilled in war, learned, sagacious. He also extremely suspicious and cruel. Hence, he destroyed the entire royal family of the Hasmoneans, and put to death many of the Jews that opposed his government, and proceeded to kill even his dearly beloved wife, Miriam of the Hasmonean line, and his two sons she had borne him. And when we read about the Hasmoneans, this is a Bible study on its own, but those were the descendants of the Maccabees. When you read about the Maccabees, the books that are in between basically Malachi and Matthew, if you want to know what happened but before Christ was born, those are good books to read. Basically, after Alexander the Great, or Alexander the Great, took over that known world of the Mediterranean from India all the way to Ethiopia, he died and left 4 generals. One of the generals, Antiochus the fourth, Antiochus Epiphanes IV. He basically took over the region. It was very oppressive towards the Jews, and they fought back. And they had a leader called Judas Maccabees, and he fought against them. And he was able to form their own independent state of Judea. That's when they took on the name the Jews, the Romans versus the Jews. You read about that in history, but they were able to establish their own state, and they were basically called the Hasmoneans because um, they took on the rulership as the king and also the priests. So I think it was either his great grandson or his great grandson. He was able to basically maintain the rulership until the Romans took over the area, and they basically disposed of that empire. But they allowed them to maintain, but they had to put their own proxy leader, and that's when you see Antipater and Herod. So Herod married the Hasmoneans or the descendants of the Maccabees, and that's how he became the king of the Jews. But we'll get into that too. Let's go back. Hence, he destroyed his entire royal family of the Hasmoneans, put to death many of the Jews that opposed his government, and proceeded to kill even his dearly beloved wife, Marimene, of the Hasmonean line, and his two sons she had borne him. But these acts of bloodshed, and especially by his love and imitation of Roman customs and institutions, and by the burdensome taxes imposed upon his subjects, he so alienated the Jews that he was unable to regain their favor by his splendid restoration of the temple and other acts of munificence, or munificence. He died in the 70th year of his age, the 37th year of his reign, the fourth before the Dionysian era. In his closing years, John the Baptist and Christ were born. Matthew narrates that he commanded all the male children under 2 years old in Bethlehem to be slain. So he was a very ruthless man, very evil man. And the only thing that he did, I guess, kind of good was he rebuilt the temple, or he made it better, I guess, if you want to say that. But yeah, he was a very evil man. All right, now let's go into his father, Antipater, Idumean governor of Judea. He died 43 BC, Idumean founder of the Herodian dynasty in Palestine. Antipater gained power in Judea by making himself useful to the Romans. In return for Antipater's support, Caesar appointed him procurator of Judea in 47 BC. Although Antipater was assassinated by a political rival 4 years later, his son, Herod I the Great, was later made king of Judea by the Romans. So now you see a picture. These are the descendants of the Maccabees right here. All right. Hyrcanus, he was the last king, basically, until he had a daughter, or his brother had a daughter, and I guess a granddaughter, but it was Maryamene. She married Herod the Great, and he was the son of Antipater, right? All right. So that's how Herod became the ruler. But as we see, Antipater the Idumean, he was an Edomite. So that's how the nation of Edom was in control of the Jews at that time. Very similar to how they are right now. But let's keep going. There's just a big, zoomed in picture. All right. So excuse me for the small print, but this is gonna be real quick, hopefully. So though historians understand that Antipater's family converted to Judaism in the 2nd century BCE, different stories have circulated in the wake of his sons coming to power. They demonstrated the tensions that existed between the Jewish people and the powerful Edomites who appeared at this time. Nicholas of Damascus, the core historian for Herod, wrote that Herod's ancestors were among the biblical elite in Jerusalem who had been taken by King Nebuchadnezzar into Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BCE. The account serves two purposes. When the Persian king Cyrus sent the captives in Babylon back to Judea, it is likely that some chose to settle elsewhere, and a legitimate dispersion such as this would shroud the fact that Herod's ancestry is undocumented and meticulous records of his Jewish return of Jewish families. So Herod basically tried to falsify history like they do now. He tried to make it seem like he was part of the the people who were taken to Babylon, like Daniel, and he was a dispersed So he doesn't have his records of, where his lineage comes from. So that's why he's like, that's why I don't have my lineage like you guys, but I'm still Jewish or Jew. So yeah, but that wasn't true. But claiming a heritage among the Jews from as early as the Babylonian captivity provides credibility for a pro-Roman and Hellenized Herod as king over the Jews, for they were highly contemptuous of him. They did not like Herod. Josephus, who is a historian, he explains this rendering by critiquing its author. Nicholas wrote to please Herod and would do so at the cost of truthfulness, because if you wrote his true identity, he'd probably put you to death. So you had to make up something to keep your stay alive. So that's what Josephus explained. That's the reason why he said we even have that story. He said that's not true. So he said instead, Josephus explains that Antipater's family converted to Judaism during the forced conversions by the Sadducee influenced Hasmonean leader John Hyrcanus, and went from 134 to 104 BCE. Hyrcanus threatened that any Idumean who wished to maintain their land would need to be circumcised and enter into the tradition of the Jews. Josephus acknowledges Herod as being by birth a Jew and Antipater as being of the same people with the Jews, because he was born into that religion. That's why he said he was born a Jew, but he's not a quote unquote Jew by blood. He's not um, he's not really a descendant of the, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob of that lineage, right? So, nevertheless, this influential family came to be resented by many Jews for their Edomite ancestry, a fact used by the Hasmoneans and their supporters against them. As such, in a polemic against Herod and discredit him in the eyes of the Romans as unfit to become king of the Jews, Antigonus, the Hasmonean, is quoted by Josephus as referring to Herod as no more than a private man and Idumean, i.e., a half Jew. So they tried to justify the reason why they were basically intermarrying with this person or that these people, because almost like they were forced to. The Romans basically made an ultimatum to the Hasmonean dynasty. They were like, if you want to maintain your rulership, he is going to be a part of your family, or you're just going to be taken out of power. So they have to justify it some way. So Hyrcanus, this is just the account of Hyrcanus when he converted the Idumeans. So he said Hyrcanus conquered Transjordan Samaria and Idumea, also known as Edom, and forced Idumeans to convert to Judaism. Hyrcanus subdued all the Idumeans and permitted them to stay in that country if they would circumcise their genitals and make use of the law of the Jews. And they were so desirous of living in the country of their forefathers that they submitted to the use of circumcision and the rest of the Jewish ways of living, at which time, therefore, this befell them, that they were hereafter no other than Jews. So this is the reason why you have a group of people who call themselves Jews, even though they have no lineage to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? They have a lineage to Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. All right. You see how the difference is. All right. So now when you read the New Testament, you understand the contention that a lot of people are having with the Messiah with some of the things that he's saying, because there are a group of people who call themselves Jews, but they're not. Right. In Revelation 2:9, right? Things start to connect when you start understanding the history. All right. So let's go back. So this is Antipater. This is the name Antipater. This is not the same Antipater who was the father of Herod. This is the Antipater who was born in 397 BCE. I've looked up this name. This name doesn't occur anywhere else but in Greece, particularly in Macedonia, right? So we're going to talk about why that's important. So Antipater, he was a Macedonian general, region of Macedonia, and of the Macedonian Empire, whose death signaled the end of the centralized authority in the empire. One of the leading men in Macedonia at the death of Philip II in 336, he helped to secure the succession to the Macedonian throne for Philip's son Alexander the Great, who upon departure for the conquest of Asia, appointed Antipater regent in Macedonia with the title of general in Europe. Antipater's main task was to hold the northern frontiers against the hostile tribes and to keep order amongst the Greek states. He ruled Greece by cooperating with the League of Corinth. All right. So Antipater literally means like the father. It was Roman, but in Greek, that's what it means. Antipater, Patros. He was the Macedonian general statesman under subsequent kingship of Philip II of Macedon and his son Alexander the Great. This is the lineage or the genealogy and the descendants of Antipater. So Antipater, his son, he had a son named Cassander. He was one of Alexander the Great's friends, and he actually became one of the 4 generals who actually ruled over Macedon and the Greek states. But you see this name Antipater here. His grandson was named Antipater in 297 BC. So this name is very synonymous with the Macedonian people, Antipater. So I'm just making a deduction. Herod's father, Antipater the Idumean, seems to maybe have some ties to Macedon, of the Macedonians. All right. I'm just making just a connection with the name. That's it, because it's not that long. 297 BCE. Antipater was born, in 40 BC? I mean, that's, just about 250 years. It's not that far, So just a thought. But let's get into what I say that, because we're going to read about some of the Macedonian history and a lineage. All right. Hopefully y'all stand with me. Esther chapter 3, verse 1. So this is Esther, very, very, very beautiful book in the Bible. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above the princes that were with him. So I just want to, talk about Haman. So Haman was the main protagonist of the book of Esther, who goes against Mordecai, who's Esther's cousin. And he basically has a plot to destroy all the Jews who are in modern day Persia at the time. So Haman, he's going to the king to try to convince him to kill the Jews unknowingly to him, even though he doesn't realize that his wife, the Queen Esther, is Jew. She's a so-called Jew. So Esther chapter 10 or chapter 3 verse 10, and the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. So he gave him permission to do his acts unbeknownst to him. But I just wanted to read about this. Agagite. What is an Agagite? An Agagite is a patronymic from H90, an Agagite, or a descendant of Agag. And we know what that is. And even in the Jewish tradition, they knew Agag was an Amalekite, because Agag, he was the king of Amelek. He was the person that Saul spared when Samuel told him, you're supposed to kill all the Amalekites, even the women, the children, the animals. And Saul, he spared Agag and he spared the animals. Remember that in 1 Samuel? I think around chapter 13, around that chapter 12 or 13. But yeah, Samuel told Saul to kill all the Agagites, but he spared the king. So apparently Haman is a descendant of Agag, or at least the royal family of Agag, right? The royal family of Amalekite, the Amalekite. So this is the editions of Esther. If you have a 1611 King James Bible, or if you have an Apocrypha, you'll notice that there are additional chapters to the book of Esther. All right, like a very important prayer that Esther prayed before she talked to the king. And there's a letter that is written by the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, and he writes something in the 16th chapter, and he says, for Haman, or Ammon, because it's written in Greek, so the H is silent, but it's Haman, the Ammon, a Macedonian, the son of Ammedatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received of us. So you see, in the Apocrypha, or the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Bible, they say a Macedonian, but in the Bible, it calls him an Agagite. But the Bible in the Apocrypha, they're basically saying the same thing. They just gave him different titles. The same way you would say that, oh, I'm from St. Louis, and someone would say, oh, but you black. It's like, I'm showing your geography, your location, where you're from. But I'm also showing you your designated racial title. The same way, that's the same thing. So they say they're conflating the same thing. Or even I would say like, oh, I'm from this area. I'm Jamaican, but I'm also what my common lineage of that place they would call me if I was from Jamaica. So it's like the same thing they're saying that. So they're equating Agagite and Macedonian as the same thing. And I just put that there because I want to show that that was all connected with Antipater and Herod and Alexander the Great. The Macedonians were the descendants of the Agagites, or at least the descendants of the Amalekites. All right, that's why I just want to highlight that. And these Idumeans, who may have this connection to the Macedonians, at least Antipater and his son Herod did, they were the descendants of these Amalekites. Just the connection I want to share with y'all with that. And of course, everything I'm saying is alleged. But these are, the Jewish people that they called themselves today. They have those lineages. All right. So the same thing, Esther, just to repeat, Esther chapter 3, verse 10, and the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. Agagite and Macedonian are the same thing. And if people want pictures, you see how close Macedon is to Greek states. It's really basically you put it as the same category. It's not really much. It's almost like Canada and the United States. It's North America, and, but this is what, basically Paul was writing a lot of letters to. You see Corinth right here. You see Sparta, Thebes, Athens. Over here you got Crete, Ephesus, Lesbos. If y'all didn't know, this is where we get the term lesbian from. Lesbos, lesbian. There's a lot of stuff that was going on in the Greek culture. That's why Paul, he was so explicit in his letters, especially in Romans first chapter. He had to combat a lot of things that was going on in these areas, right? All right. One more thing, couple things. Almost done. Almost done. So the interpretation of Idumean, I found this is very interesting. I just wanted to go over it. So in the study of Isaiah, how did you come to find the Hebrew definition of Idumea was silence or death? The prophet Isaiah was a master of the Hebrew language and frequently makes plays on Hebrew words to communicate subtle meaning. Studying how these words are used across scripture leads us to useful insights. In the case of Pastor Armstrong's teaching from Isaiah 21, a close study of the scripture provides the answer. So in the case of Pastor Armstrong's teaching from Isaiah 21, a close study of the scripture provides the answer. So this is Isaiah chapter 21, verse 11. The oracle concerning Edom. One keeps calling to me from Seir. Watchman, how far gone is the night? Watchman, how far gone is the night? Verse 12. The watchman says, morning comes, but also night. If you would inquire, come back again. So as Pastor Armstrong explains in his notes, the word translated as Edom is actually the word Idumea or Yeduma in Hebrew. We see this clearly when looking at the Septuagint version of Isaiah. So let's read the Septuagint version of it. The vision of Idumea, call to me out of Seir, guard ye the bulwarks. I watch in the morning and the night. If thou would inquire, and dwell by me. Notice in the Septuagint, Isaiah says the vision is of Idumea, which is another name for Edom. In Hebrew, the word Idumea means silent / death. We find this confirmed in Psalm chapter 31. So Psalm 31, verse 17, let me not be put to shame, O Lord. I call upon you. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them be silent in Sheol. The same word, Yedumu, is used in Psalm 31, verse 17, translated as silent. Add that to the location of Sheol, we see the psalmist is referring to the silence that death produces. Therefore, Isaiah is using that name to subtly explain this was an oracle about Edom and one that foretells his end. So this is the prophecy of Edom, the nation of Edom. They're going to be silent in the last day and judgment day because of the wickedness that that nation has brought about this world, basically. But I mean, not to just pick on Edom or anything. A lot of our people are going to be destroyed as well. But there's a prophecy specifically for Edom, and they're going to be silent. So Isaiah was using a lot of wordplay, just like how brothers have double entendres, triple entendres in their rhyme scheme when they rap and stuff like that. The same thing they do that in the scriptures. That's why it's important to go and get a concordance and read the Bible in its original language, whether it be the Greek or the Hebrew or the Aramaic. You get a lot more understanding of things. All right. One of the last things I got. This is a very good article written in 2020, December. Being white is not the Jewish norm. How the Mishnah can help us deconstruct a white normative approach to Judaism. So he's basically saying that white people are not the original Jews, basically. But let's keep. I'm gonna read a couple of his statements. The Mishnah, for y'all don't know, that's the Talmud. So the Mishnah does not only differentiate Jews from the members of Germanic tribes, it also states that a Jew's skin is unlike that of a Cushi. The word denotes a person from Cush, a kingdom that centered along the Nile Valley in the present-day Sudan to the south of Egypt. The two civilizations were engaged in warfare, trade, and cultural exchange for centuries. Cush existed between circa 1070 BCE until 350 CE. Wow, that's a long time. That's over 1400 years. That's a nation. America is just over, 1776. That's just a little bit, not even 300 years. A nation that's over 1400 years. That's amazing. That is included the period of the Mishnah. Later on, the Hebrew word Cushi came to refer other Black African peoples too. For instance, when the original Judeo-Arabic script of the 12th century philosophical work, the Khazars, mentions the Habesha. Habesha is an ethnic or pan-ethnic identifier frequently employed to refer to the Semitic language, speaking peoples mainly found in the highlands of present-day Ethiopia and Eritrea peoples. The Hebrew versions of the text introduced them as Cushi, even though Habeshna and Cushtic are different markers of identity. The Greeks called Cush Ethiopia, which means literally burnt face. I think a lot of people knew that Ethiopia means burnt face. Due to the Greek cultural dominance, many, including Jewish translators, would later translate Cushi as Ethiopian. All right. So basically, they're just saying a dark-skinned African is what they would call Cushi or Ethiopian. Basically, people who live in like modern-day Uganda, Thus, as the Mishnah states, Jews are neither like Germani nor like the Cushi. Instead, the Jew's skin has, according to the Mishnah, is an intermediate shade. So what's in between a so-called Caucasian and a so-called Black African? This rabbinic perception of the Jew's skin color as brown follow those Egyptian papyri that states that Jews were honey colored. So what color is honey? What color is honey?
Brown.
Exactly. This is a color guy. This is a honey color guy. I found this on the internet. People who make honey. They have water white honey, which is like a very light skin, and they have dark amber. So this goes from like Steph Curry to like a Wesley Snipes. And then they also use they say something called boxwood. I kind of skipped that boxwood right here. This is a boxwood tree. They're not talking about the green leaves. They're talking about the bark. As you can see, that's brown. That's what they would call the people at that time who were the quote unquote Israelites. They would call them box colored, honey colored, regardless if it was a so-called Black person. That's what it was. So that's why it's like all this talk about anti-Semitism. If KyrieIrving was able to articulate his words, he would be able to explain things away. But that's why it's important to have understanding of what you believe. So when people confront you with titles like anti-Semite, you're able to back it up with information rather than just being shamed into stopping your beliefs, basically, because that's what they're doing. Going back to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, one of the 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor of dark races, not the Negros, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites. We just read that. that how the Mishnah or the oral Talmud, they said that the way that describes people's skin tone was Kushi, which is what we would call an African. But they said the Negroes are not like that. They're what they would call boxwood. That's why the Negroes are not classified as Hamites. Negroes are Shemites because we are the descendants of the people of the book in prophecy and historically. All right. So that's when you read Revelation 2:9, when it says, I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. That is an anti-Semitic statement. That's in the Bible. That's why I want to say that the Bible is about to be labeled as anti-Semitic. The Bible is going to be illegal in these last days. So you have to make sure you understand what you're being signed up if you've decided to be a quote unquote Christian or a believer or an Israelite. Understand the persecution you're going to face. So you have to be solid in your beliefs if you want to believe it. If not, then you shouldn't grab onto that. You should grab onto another belief system. But he says in verse 10, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall come cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. Amen. So that's the promise that you have if you hold on to your faith. Even if you have to lose your job, you have to lose friends, you have to lose family, people going to call you crazy, people going to say you're hateful, whatever. You got to understand the blessing and the gift that you're going to get if you hold on to that. If you hold on to your identity that Christ has given you, not necessarily from a blood lineage, but he regained your identity. All right. Oh, I got something. Y'all got time? This is real quick. It's real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Very edifying. So this is from the Smithsonian Library. This is a book called America. This is written in 1671. This is good because old books, they weren't altered like they are now. So let's go. This is just the title. This is New America, the accurate description of the New World empires or of Mexico and Peru, plantations parts. So it has a lot of information. So we're going to skip, I believe, what page was it on? I think it's 574. I believe so. Hold on. Oh man, I should have wrote it down. Yes. Wait. Yes. No, that's 72. Yes, this is it right here. All right. All right. So we know about in history, there was a deportation of Jews in 1492. Portugal, they deported a lot. Portugal and Spain. Spain did it first, and then Portugal did it at the end. In 1492, they deported their Jews. That's where we get the word Sephardic Jews from. They lived in basically Sephardium, or they lived in Iberia, Spain, and Portugal. But if you looked at conventional history, they said the Sephardic Jews, they moved back to like the Middle East or Turkey or something like that. But this book tells us where some of these Jewish people went, or quote unquote Jewish people went. So let me zoom in a little bit. All right, it said the Portuguese. So in Old English, the F was sometimes replaced for an S. The Portuguese that dwell on this inland and formed the Netherlands. The Netherlanders are the Dutch. So the Portuguese that dwelt in the inland and formed the Dutch or the Netherlanders, that few lived above 50 years there. Yet notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills, right? That John III, the king of Portugal, so the king of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before. So this book was written, in the 1600s. So this is like in the 1400s. So he sent a colony to this place, right? And there 200 years before, whom thou the unwholesome air destroyed, so they were killed. But he said, yet the place was not left desolate, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled in Guinea. So we know Guinea is West Africa. Next in Angola, we know that's West Africa. And lastly, in inland St. Thomas, that's also an island on West Africa. That so they might be the better us to the air that that said King sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion and caused their children to be baptized, from whom coming thither in great numbers, uh, soft, the present inhabitants were defended. So he's conflating this word Negro with Jews. So these Negroes or these Jews were slaves that were sent to the west coast of Africa, and they worked the sugar cane. This is in the 1500s, right?
Mhm.
All right, let me do this one. This is the last thing I got. This is St. Thomas. This is St. Thomas. If you look, this is the map of St. Thomas. I guess not the best. Hold on. Let's look at a map of Africa real quick. I want to really dig in the point. Gotta dig this in. All right. So you see right here, that's up north. You see Nigeria. You see Ghana. This island right here. This is Saint Tome. This is Saint Thomas. All right. This is the island that the Portuguese sent these slaves. All right. From Portugal. These were Jews. Let's read about this. This is Saint Tome. Let's read about that. Let's go down. Go. Where is that? Oh, where? The history. Right here. Founded the colony of Saint Tome in 1493. The Portuguese came to Saint Tome in search of land to grow sugar cane. The island was uninhabited before the arrival of the Portuguese sometime around 1470. Saint Tome or Sao Tome or Saint Thomas or Sao Tome, situated about 40 kilometers, 25 miles north of the equator, had a climate wet enough to grow sugar cane in wild abundance. 2,000 Jewish children, 8 years old and under, were taken from the Iberian Peninsula for work on the sugar plantations. The nearby African kingdom of Congo eventually became a source of slave labor as well. So you see 2,000 Jewish children who were 8 years or under, they were sent to this island to be slaves. And eventually these slaves were taken to where? The Americas, whether it was Brazil or North America, South America, whatever you want to call it. They were, or the Caribbean islands. These were part of those people who were deported from their, homeland in Spain and Portugal, went to St. Thomas, and then they were settled there, and then eventually they were shipped to the Americas, as well as other Africans who lived there, who also had Shemitic descent.
Mm.
So that's another story for another lesson for another day. But I just want to put that there because if you're 8 years old, you can just imagine, my niece, that age, they have no understanding of where they're from. So they identify with whatever you tell them. So if you come and you bring them into a new land, they don't even have their parents because they were taken from Portugal because their parents refused to convert to Catholicism or convert to Christianity. So that's why they took their children as slaves. So that's why it's like this is a lot. This is very deep, very deep. That's why I was like, this is real history right here. So that's why it's like when I excuse me, when I go about this history, it really is it touches deep because I know, where our people come from. And it's not just the narrative that they gives us. We come from a long history and they don't like to tell us about that. So that's why it's very important we get back to our culture and we understand where we come from because our people went through a lot, even more than we even recognize or even that we understand now. All right. So that's all I got. Hopefully somebody got edified by it. All right. Peace.